Welcome to Bigfoot Society. If you have Bigfoot activity to report from the same areas discussed in this episode, please reach out to me directly after this episode. And if you'd like to be on the podcast to discuss a personal Bigfoot encounter, please reach out to me directly at bigfootsociety@gmail.com. Do you wish there was more Bigfoot Society to listen to every week? Well, there is now. If you become a supporting member over at Patreon, you get a special members-only episode every single week on Wednesdays, and sometimes even more episodes. Head on over to patreon.com/the Bigfoot Society. And now let's get on with the show. All right, Bigfoot Society, I've got the privilege of talking to Mr. Johnny Tucker today. He's a Bigfoot researcher down there in North Carolina. How's it going, Dan?
It's going good. I was kind of hoping for an early spring, but we're going through another cold snap at the moment, but things are going very well. Thank you for the invite to on the podcast Bigfoot Society, and congratulations on your success.
Oh, yeah. I was happy that our mutual friend, Miss V, was able to make the connection, and it looks like you've got some really interesting things that we'll be looking into today, and we've got a few sounds that you've recorded. We'll listen to those further in the episode. But Johnny, what was it that got you first into this whole Bigfoot thing to begin with?
Well, I'd have to give credit to my parents, because back in the day, I was probably about 7 years old, and they took us to see one of the movies that came out. I believe it was back in the 70s. One was called Creature from Black Lake. And I believe the other one that came out up on the big screen was Sasquatch. And ever since then, I was pretty much terrified. But the whole allure of does Bigfoot exist, that stuck with me throughout my whole life, basically. And then from ever since, the TV shows that came on, Legend of Boggy Creek, In Search of Monster Quest. And then when YouTube and the internet came out, just finding stories, Bigfoot stories and encounters, it just pretty much just blew the doors wide open. So it's pretty much stuck with me my whole life.
When was it that you first realized that all the stuff you've got going on down there in North Carolina?
Well, I always kind of thought that Bigfoot was out on the West Coast for some reason when I was growing up, because I grew up in a big city just north of Buffalo, New York. So I'm pretty much a city slicker, and we really didn't have, we probably had to travel about 2.5 hours down to the Allegheny Mountains, which is down the Pennsylvania-New York border. For if any Bigfoots were existed, that would be the area, but we hardly got down there. So I pretty much thought it was a West Coast thing, maybe Smoky Mountains. I'm more toward the eastern part of North Carolina, about 2.5 hours from the coast. So the mountains for me is a good 4-hour drive. So I kind of figured it would be more up toward the mountains. And it wasn't until an episode of Finding Bigfoot where they did some research and some investigating in the Uwharrie National Forest. And the Uwharrie National Forest, it's about a 3-hour drive for me. It's pretty much right in the center part of North Carolina. And then from that, I just pretty much was doing some Google searching, see if there's any kind of sightings or activity that was closer to me, closer to the East Coast. Checking out the BFRO website, there was a few reports up and around my county. I don't think a lot of people who have had Bigfoot sightings or encounters there report to the BFRO, probably one for a couple of reasons. One, they probably don't know that the BFRO exists, and probably they just want to keep it more hush hush. And the BFRO website, I was checking out a Bigfoot mapping project. There's some sightings up around where I live, and I work with a guy who has some family land. It's about 40 minutes to my west, and back in I believe it was about 6 years ago, maybe 7 years ago, he had either posted up on Facebook or had commented on somebody's Facebook post that he had seen a white Sasquatch on his family's land. So that pretty much brought it even closer to me. And from there, just doing some Google searching, there is a cryptozoology and paranormal museum. It's about a half an hour, 40-minute drive from me. And back in the fall of 2019, they actually had a festival up in this state park. It's called Medoc Mountain State Park. It's pretty much in a rural part of the state, 45-minute drive from Raleigh, Roanoke Rapids, the big city. So it's out in a rural area. And I said, heck yeah, I'll go up there and attend it. And met some great people, a lot of local people, a lot of local hikers, a lot of local folks up in the area that have either had encounters meaning tree knocks, finding tree structures, sightings, finding footprints in and around the Medoc Mountain area. And from what I took from listening to everybody and talking to a lot of folks is that it's not just in the state park area. It's pretty much up in that part of North Carolina, northern part, northeastern part, central part. So that's what really got me into it. And I realized that maybe I don't have to go out to the West Coast to encounter or to see if this Bigfoot phenomenon exists. I can just go a little ways up the road, and that's pretty much what I did. I started doing a lot of hiking and experiencing a lot of stuff out that way. And for sure, it is real.
Was there a certain event that really, pushed you over the edge as you were starting to go through your research? Something that was like, wow, okay, there is no question that what I'm dealing with is right out there right now.
I started the way that my work schedule was. I had my days off were during the week and pretty much in the afternoon. So being a rural park, there's really not a lot of people. You get a good weekend crowd up there, but during the week, it's really, there's hardly anybody up there. So the first time I went hiking was October of that year, and I had a little tire thumper in my car. And it's parked up in the parking lot. There's nobody around. And I started to do just a couple tree knocks. I really didn't know what I was doing. The one trail that I went down, it kind of goes downstream. It's about a 10-minute walk down to the creek. So about halfway down the trail, I didn't know the tree knock and just ran stealth, or just ran quiet, and made it down to the creek. And the atmosphere that day, it was like super hot. Even for October, it was super hot. It was just dead quiet. Really nothing brewing. And here comes a tree knock back from the other side of the creek, up one of the bluffs. I mean, just as crystal clear as you can think. It probably sounded like a pine tree, something hitting a pine tree, but just clear as day. The second time went out hiking was a week later. One afternoon, started at about 2:30 and took a different trail. I went upstream this time, a little longer of a loop. It's probably about a 2.5-mile hike. And I got to about halfway on the trail, and it kind of loops back. You're going to come back through a very tight, narrow section of woods, and then eventually out to a field where the parking lot is. So I noticed that there was a couple X structures back in the woods, and there's also some tree breaks back there. But for some reason, when I made that turn and just about to head back in, there was just a super feeling of something watching you, just an anxiety. It was kind of like my sixth sense just kicked in overdrive. Really never experienced anything like that before. And I was really deciding whether or not to keep on going or to go back the long way. And at that time, it was probably about 4 o'clock in the afternoon. It was mid-October, so the sun was coming down below the tree line, so it was starting to get dark. So I kind of sucked it up, started going down the trail where the trees, both sides of the tree lines, kind of enclosed in a little bit. Did one more tree knock, and then ran silent out there. But in the meantime, being up in this area, there's a lot of hunters, and they hunt with dogs. So a lot of times that the dogs, they don't come back. They get lost in the woods, unfortunately. But there was this dog that was somewhere not close to me, but somewhere back in the woods, and it started barking just randomly, nothing to get be alarmed about. So I say I was probably about 50 yards, if not even closer, to coming out into this meadow, into this field. The dog was still behind me back somewhere in the woods, but it was barking even more. I had stopped all of a sudden back where I was, not directly back behind me, but back in the area that I was, comes this super loud, it was a low yell. It was basically like a super powerful yell back there. And it was a person couldn't do it. It was just like super strong. I mean, like it echoed throughout the whole woods, and the dog shut right up. So I don't know if the yell was directed toward the dog or if it was directed toward me coming through the area. So I made it out, went to my car. It was about 4:30 by that time, and sat in my car, and there was two other cars in the parking lot. So I was like, well, I'm just going to sit here, and just in case if somebody was behind me, just like screwing around, they're going to come out, and I'll be able to see if there was anybody back there. But two cars in the parking lot, they were up in the pavilion area using the restroom. They came out and they left. I sat in my car and I was just like, wow. Went home, got on YouTube, Googled everything, black bear sounds, yells, black bears, everything. And it did not even come close. It was like an unbearish yell. It was a short yell. I would describe it as if a person was trying to scare somebody, and they were, say, if a person was hiding behind something, and then their friend comes up, and then they go, rah! And that's really how it was. But it was so powerful. December of that year, just a few months later, there's a service road that connects a really small parking lot, and you can access the back trails just going. It's probably about an 8-minute walk down the service road. And I had stopped there one afternoon in December. I was just going to take a quick walk right down to the bridge that leads back up to the service trails, and there's actually a creek that runs the whole length of the park. So there's a bridge, and you go over the creek, and then you go up to the back trails. So I was probably maybe about 30 yards, 50 yards from the parking lot, had stopped on the service road, turned to the tree line, and I was trying to get my cell phone up and running. And just directly where I had stopped, you're going to have a lot of small brushes, a lot of dead briars, and then probably back maybe 50 yards, if not even 50 yards, you're going to have a taller section of pine trees, the taller pines. But back behind the pine trees, here comes this super loud howl. And it was short. It probably lasted about 3 or 4 seconds. And describe it as, if you watch Finding Bigfoot with Matt Moneymaker, he does this howl. It's probably about the 3 or 4 seconds of his howl. That's how loud it was. And I heard something walking back there, just stepping, kind of pacing back and forth there. The leaf litter, December, it's like super thick, super dry. And I just like froze in my tracks. I was like, wow, I really didn't know what to do. So I basically just like howled back at it just to see what it would do to come, if it was going to come at me or if it was just going to stay back there. But I went back in the air the next day, had a friend of mine, and just trying to debunk it, just had my friend go down the service road to where the trailhead was and just like yell as loud as you could. Also over into the parking lot, just yell as loud as you could. And it was like nothing compared to the powerful howl that was. It took me about a month to get enough nerves to go back there just to check out what the area looked like. But when I did, just before you get into the pine barrier, there was a small X structure. It wasn't huge. It probably came up to my chest, and there was also a tree break back there. And the tree breaks that we find around here, they're usually between 6 and 7 feet. So there's a X structure tree break. So ever since then, I was pretty much new to it. I bought this audio recorder, and I carried it up on my backpack everywhere I went to, just to try to document, just in case something like this happens again. So it wasn't until March of the following year, 2020, we had a pretty mild winter that year. And I wanted to test to see, I've heard people leaving audio recorders outside overnight. And I pretty much just wanted to test and see what the battery capacity would be and how much memory would be to run overnight. So I went down to a remote part of the creek and left the recorder up in just like a little notch of the tree, and came back the next morning and picked it up. And just listening to the audio for that night, it was nothing special. It was just normal. You know, being in March, it was still pretty quiet. So a little bit of crickets, a little bit of this, not even a little bit of deer running around, because you can tell when a deer or a dog walks through the brush. It's kind of like peg leggy type. At 2:30 in the morning, something starts to walk. You can hear it walk. It's in the distance, and it walks at it wasn't a run. It was more like a quick walk, not a fast walk, but a quick walk. It starts off, walks right past the area that I had the recorder set up. Now this is down by one of the areas of the creek, and at the time there was a down tree there. So you hear this thing walking. It's coming closer. It's coming closer. You hear it step over the tree, and when it does the step over, it sounds like a two-legged step over. It goes a little bit past, and it settles down in the area for a couple hours. You can hear it shuffling in the leaves. You can hear it kind of shifting its weight. Now, 4 o'clock in the morning, it does a tree knock. 4:45 in the morning, it does a second tree knock. And then you can hear it leaving the area, shuffling off into the area. And it wasn't like a real big blast. I call them power knocks, like if you get a baseball bat and just hit a tree as hard as you could. It sounded like it had either a stick or a club, and it just like casually just like hit the tree. But ever since then, that was pretty much my eye opener. Listening to that audio was my eye opener, because you can argue, you know, the footsteps coming through, and I think it took something like about 50 seconds till when you first hear it walking to where it settled in. I think the whole time frame was about 50 seconds. And you can kind of argue that, you know, two-legged, four-legged. But when you throw in the tree knocks after that, that was pretty much my eye-opener moment. And from that point on, I was 100% committed. And the most important thing about that audio clip is that it did not circle back and come back where it came from. It kept on going. And so I basically just kept on going with doing audio, leaving audio recorders up, probably about a quarter mile up, searching that area really, really well. It's right next to the creek, and just trying to develop some patterns, you know, for over the next 5 years, coming across footprints up in the creek beds, finding tree breaks, finding tree structures, and basically just hoping to come across one of these creatures one day. But that audio that night, between the walk by and adding in the tree knocks, that was my eye opener moment.
Should we try to play some of that audio right now? I'm just going to go through how you sent them over to me here.
Okay.
So I think we start out with a few tree knocks. So let's play those.
I can give you some times and dates on those if you'd like.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
As we go through the list. That first one, that big power knock where it hits the tree twice and the tree falls, that was in June of 2021. That was 2:15 in the morning. That second one, that close by one, that was just last October. Yeah, October of 2024, and that was 4:45 in the morning. That was pretty close.
I'm going to play the second one again. It sounds really interesting. Do you think that was hit on something wood, or what do you think?
I'm glad you asked that. There's tree knocks that I've heard in person before, and there's tree knocks that I've gotten on audio recorded that you can definitely tell 100% that it is a stick or a branch hitting a tree. It's just that wood knock tone to it. And sometimes when that happens, if you ever go out in the woods and you find like a 4 foot or a 3 foot branch and you hit against a tree, the top part might break off. In some audio recordings I've gotten, it's definitely a tree, wood hitting a tree, and then sometimes you can hear that part kind of break off. Now that recording there I've heard in person before, and I've also got the same tone way back out in the woods, probably I think it was in 2023, but it's that same tone, but it does have kind of like a metallic kind of undertone to it. So
Right.
really not sure, but to back it up, I've heard that before. I've had friends out there that has heard that tone before, and I picked up that tone also back out in a different, even more remote area. So
Let's continue here. Next up, we've got, it says knock in a whistle from 22. I'm going to try these here. That first one really has a baseball bat type quality to it.
that knock was back in December. It was actually December 29th, 2022. And that was caught, I think it was 9:15 p.m. And that was in the same area that my first audio recording where the thing walked and did the two tree knocks. That was right in that same area. So yeah, it actually sounds like maybe it had hit a tree and some dead leaves from the tree came down and fell. And then that whistle, same recorder, same location, 45 minutes later was the whistle.
What's the what type of recorder are you using?
I use a little Sony. It's nothing really spectacular. I think you can probably pick one up for about $65. I don't have the item number. It's just a little rectangle shaped Sony recorder. I usually put it in if you go to the eye doctor, he might give you like a cloth sleeve.
Mm-hmm.
I just slip it right in the sleeve, and sometimes I run an external microphone. But just a little Sony. It's just real not hard to pick up at the store, Amazon.
Interesting. These are really good. I'm going to continue here. This one's a little bit longer, maybe some whoops. We'll see what we got here. Uh-oh, you still there? Nope. Okay. All right, let's call him back real quick.
Hey, sorry about that. We got disconnected.
Hey, no problem. It happens all the time for some reason or another.
I think I hit the wrong button. Okay.
I'm used to it. All right, so I think this next one's a little bit longer. Just want to make sure. Okay, audio is still coming through good. So let's play this guy here. So that was really interesting. What did we have going on there?
Okay, that was recorded in an area which I believe that there was a juvenile in for a couple of years, just kind of like hanging out. I don't think it's back there now because a lot of the activity back in that area is kind of decreased. The backstory on that is back in 2020, we found some footprints along that one service road that I was talking about. It rained the night before, and I was out there with about 3 other people. Came across some footprints. It appeared that it was walking along the service road. It had stepped in the service road with its right foot, went down to the creek, had a slid print down to the creek, and then it came back up the same way. It had stepped on another part of the service road where you can able to see the footprint with its left foot. The measurements of the footprint were 12 and a half. It was 5.5 inches wide. So the summer of 2022, when that was recorded, it was a real dry year here, and the creek, the not a lot of water in the creek, so there's a lot of exposed creek beds. And over the summer, I was noticing that same size footprint up in a couple different areas of the creek bed, not anywhere near the trails. And it appeared like it came down off of one of the bluffs and it had stepped in going down to the creek. So I was going to meet a friend of mine. This is going back, I think it may have been August. Yeah, August of 2022. We had got a campsite there, and we usually do is get a campsite and then we'll head out in the trails, head out in the woods with thermal equipment, trying to see if we can see anything. So I had got there, I think it was about 5:30. I went down to the creek, and I think I was probably about 50 feet from the edge of the creek, and there's not a soul around, not a car in the parking lot. And on the other side of the creek, all of a sudden, it sounds like someone took a baseball bat and just hits a tree. The tree starts to break. You can hear the fibers in the tree cracking. The tree did not fall. I pretty much went downstream, hooked the audio recorder up, back up in the woods, came back upstream, got my hip waders on, went down into the creek to try to find some prints. All when this is happening, you can literally hear something back up. It wasn't close up, but it was back a ways, just going through the dry leaf litter, just pacing back and forth. When a friend of mine got there, I was still down into the creek looking for prints. He was up on top, probably about an 8-foot bank, from the bottom up to your first level. And he literally said, "Johnny, there's something back there walking." It was just pacing back and forth. You can hear the occasional branch break. We left the area. There was a tree knock 30 minutes after we left the area. That recording there happened at midnight. Now, that area, like I said, I believe was a juvenile was hanging back out there. Evidence-wise, I found a couple 8-inch footprints back. Now, this is going back 2020. And recently, last year, found some 9-inch footprints down into the creek bed and also at the bottom of like a mud patch. And just possibly, that could have been the juvenile either mimicking or calling an owl, because the owl at the end pretty much answers it. I've been doing this for 5 years. I've never heard that before. Absolutely never heard that before. And that last tree knock, that was the same location, same reporter. That was at 6:50 in the morning. That was when that tree knock happened.
That's some wild stuff. Do you ever hear owls out there that sound like extremely large? Do you ever run into that at all?
Not often. I mean, I hear a lot of owls out there. Maybe hear one that's deeper tone than others, but nothing that would really stand out, though.
Gotcha. Well, we've just got a few more sounds to go through. I'd say let's go right through them here. Want to make sure we get them all. So let's see. Next one's about 34 seconds. So I'm going to play that here. we've got two different whoop styles in that one.
That was March of last year, and I had two recorders set up. They were about 300 yards apart. I think it had been about like 10 p.m. at night. That higher pitch whoop that kept the higher pitch one that just kept on going whoop, whoop, whoop. I think that was the juvenile. It was either back up on the bluff or back up in the forest. But at the end of that clip, I don't know how clear it came out, but there was a response, an adult one whooping back at it. And I think the next audio recorder or next audio clip I sent you was actually the adult doing a whoop.
All right, let's see here.
Yeah, that's it.
Do that a few more times here. Oh, that's wild. Oh man, if I've never heard anything like that out in the woods. Well, I mean, I've heard a roar scream, but no, like this is a pretty interesting whoop that you've been capturing here. And man, I don't know how I would deal with that. That'd be pretty cool. It almost make you think you're at the zoo for a minute.
Like I said, I had the recorders about 300 yards away. The small one, if the higher pitch whoops, it came louder. The one recorder I had upstream, the adult whoop, if you want to call it that, both recorders, the 300 yards away, picked it up. So it was either between the two recorders, or it could have been back up on one of the bluffs. But both recorders picked them up. And I think that last one with the whoop, that was in a different location. It's probably about 1.5 miles away, and that was in November of last year.
Okay. Let's see. We got another whoop here. I'm going to go ahead and play that. That's fantastic. Holy mackerel.
Yes.
Wow.
That's a good one.
I mean, have you ever looked at these in Audacity or anything? I don't know if you're familiar with how to do that.
I'm kind of like a beginner on the Audacity.
Okay.
So I've kind of played around with it a little bit, but I for sure have not mastered it. I have not mastered it at all.
We're going to go ahead and do the last one here. That is so cool.
First,
yeah.
I used to work midnight shift a lot, and I would come off midnight shift. I'd go up to this small parking lot up where I go. I get up there first thing in the morning, 8 o'clock in the morning, and he'd be the only one out there. And it's a short walk down to the creek. Like I said, probably about an 8-10 minute walk. But 3 or 4, especially in the summertime, 3 or 4 times you get there, get out of the car, you pop your trunk open, you'll hear this crisp tree knock coming back in the woods, just as crystal clear as possible. Now, I was going there for I was hooked. I was going there for like 3 or 4 days a week. So I had figured maybe they had recognized me from coming into the area, and maybe they were giving me like a hello knock. But I had talked to this other Bigfoot researchers, got many years over me, and they suggested that they're doing a knock just to warn if there's another one in the area that there's a human coming in. That's why they do that single knock.
Interesting.
But that audio clip there, I went down to the creek. I didn't have any of my equipment with me. I was basically just got off work, went up there. I wanted to go down, take a look in the creek bed just to see if anything was stepping out that night. And I didn't even have a tree knocker with me. And I usually get to one part of the creek, and I might hear a knock come up on the other side, back up in the woods. So went down there, didn't hear anything. So I started to go downstream. And as soon as I started going downstream, there was a knock other side of the creek. I'd have to say maybe 150, no, maybe about 100 yards down. It knocked. So the only thing I had to do was I was just doing like cheek pops. So I was cheek popping. It we kind of passed each other. We were kind of parallel. Did a cheek pop, it knocked back. I went down to where it was initially. It was back up where I was, and it did it again. Then I came back up and just sat on a creek bed. And just on hopes, I had a little pair of binoculars, just on hopes that maybe I could see something. Maybe, I mean, it is so thick out there in the summertime. But that one there, it was the last pop. I was doing the cheek pop, and then you hear the hawk squawking, and then it knocked back on one of the bigger trees back up on one of the bluffs there.
Is that I mean, if that happened to me, it would feel like there's a communication going back and forth. Have you experienced anything else like that in that area before, or is that a pretty rare occurrence?
That was probably the best one. The only other thing that I've experienced is just when you're in the area, you'll hear a tree knock. It could be close up in the woods. It could be other side of the creek, up on the one of the bluffs. Never had any kind of other interaction. I thought for sure that day there that that one was going to come up and like look over and check me out or something, but that was pretty much just cheek popping back and forth with that thing. That was probably the most interesting interaction. Now, I was there summer of 2023. We had a big storm come through the area, and got up there one morning, and I wanted to check to see if there's any footprints up on the trails. So pulled into the parking lot, and at the time it's a small parking lot, probably 15, 20 cars probably parked there. You'd be maxed out. But at the beginning at the front end of the parking lot, there was a state truck, and there was also a guy in a Kubota, and he had a chainsaw in the back. So they were kind of like talking back and forth. So I was under the assumption that he's probably going to go and do some trail maintenance after the storm. And the Kubota was running, so it's got a loud engine. So I parked back as far as I could, right against the tree line. Started getting my stuff out, opened up my trunk, and here comes a knock in the woods or back where I was. It was loud. I mean, it actually sounded like it hit a branch first, and then it hit the tree. So I immediately like looked at them. I'm like, "Do you guys not hear that or not?" But the sound of the engine on the Kubota was just like drowning it out to them. I went up to the tree line. I had my thermal, and where that location is, you're up on a parking lot, and it kind of like it's a gradual slope down to the creek. Didn't see anything on thermal. I went back. I actually, and I yelled, and I yelled into the trees. I said, "Where are you at?" And then I heard a grunt, a pause, and then a low growl. So it was a grunt, pause, low growl back. Went back to my car, started getting all my gear up and ready to roll. By that time, the guy in the Kubota was right at the trailhead and going down one of the trails, and then another tree knock comes back, but this time it was more toward the right and more toward back more. So I'm thinking that there was one out there that morning. The guy in the Kubota scooped them. So that's a pretty good area in the mornings.
That's wild. Do you have a recording at all of that grunt interaction?
I don't. I had popped my trunk open and was just trying to get up all my gear, and then I heard the knock, went over there with my thermal. I didn't even have my recorder or anything going.
So this reminds me of something I've heard from the Olympic Project guys, Chris Spencer. Yep. So what they say, and they've said this a few different times, and I try to keep it in mind when I go out, is a lot of the stuff that they get is right when they get out of the car. There's a lot of, and it's almost like a, hey, they're back, you know, and so usually they'll have something running like on their head, which would, you know, just to make sure they catch it. But that's wild. I used to do a call-in show, and I would have all sorts of people call in to talk. And I had this old timer call in from North Carolina once, talking about how he would go out in the Uwharries and have some really interesting interactions. And it was to the fact where he was even having conversations with your I don't know what you would call them down there. If you have like park rangers or forestry workers or whatever they would be called,
Yes.
but it sounded like from the way that this old timer was talking is that they are well aware of the different types of Bigfoot that are down there, how they act, what they're like, and they're just very, very familiar with them. Have you ever picked up on anything like that or had any conversations yourself?
Yeah, I had. Well, this really wasn't I met, they were doing a controlled burn up here a couple years ago, in 2023, and ran into one of the someone that works for the forest department, but he basically said, be careful. And I told him I'm pretty much knew what's out here. We had conversations with the park rangers. They said that they cannot say that they exist because it's it's not a proven species, but they're not. Let's see how I want to say this. I think they know. They pretty much act like they know. But they just cannot come out and say it's there because it's not a proven species. And I think it's got a lot to do with public opinion. I mean, if they say, Bigfoot's running through the park here, there's probably not going to it's probably going to slow down travel in there. But from what I can get, I think that they know, but they just cannot come out and say this is what's going on.
Wow. So you've actually had those conversations with people in the park.
They're actually very comfortable talking to us about it. I mean, we talk and they listen, and they don't, shoo us off and say, "Hey, you're crazy, get out of here." They're very open to it, conversation wise.
That's crazy. I know that's the case with places like Salt Fork State Park up in Ohio, but I was not really aware that it's also the same case down there in North Carolina. And are you a type of guy that you have like Bigfoot stickers on your truck, or it's just naturally okay? Yeah, I gotcha.
Yeah, I got a couple of Bigfoot stickers on my car. Yeah, I think also it depends on where you go too. I mean, where I go, they might be more open to talk about it or not talk about it, but like accepted. But if you go, other places in the state, they might be more defensive about it, I guess.
Yeah,
we got a good group up this way.
That's good. Are there a lot of visuals that are reported from that area ever?
Actually, one gentleman, his name's Stephen Barcelo. He runs the Cryptozoology Paranormal Museum.
Yeah, he's great.
He's got some thermal footage that he's gotten of one. I think it was back in fall of 2020. There was a 3-day camp out. I was there for the first day. We kind of like split up into two groups. The group that I was with kind of took the high way, or took the high road up the bluffs. And the group that Stephen was with, they kind of like went around and stayed down by the creek. And they were hearing some stuff. The night that I was there, the second night, I had to go do I had to split, so I wasn't there. And it was a smaller group. Stephen and the guys that he was with went back down to the area that they were in, that they were hearing some stuff on the night before. And from what happened, a few guys went down to the bottom of the bluff. They were making a bunch of noise. I don't know if they're either talking or playing some instruments. The one guy likes to go out there and play Native American flute music. I guess Stephen hung back, and he was the only one with the thermal at that time. And something had come up the bluff and was checking out the guys down below. And I think he's got like 3 pictures of it. One of it is standing between 2 trees. It's kind of like out in the distance a little bit. One of them is either kneeling down in high brush or in high brush. But he's got a really, really good picture of it, side profile walking, and it's like $1 million picture. But yeah, that's the pictures that we've gotten out of there.
That's awesome. I met Steven a few years ago. He's a great guy. I believe it was down in Lexington, Kentucky, at one of the CryptidCon conferences. So I need to reach out to him, and I've never actually chatted with him on the show, I think. So we'll have to make that happen.
Did he show you his thermal picture?
You know, I don't think, oh man, that's a good question. It's been a few years.
Yeah.
You'd think I would remember something like that really well. So I'm going to say I don't think so. But there was, I mean, it was one of those things where it was like 20 people hanging out in the bar, and there was everyone from Alex Petikoff to Eli Watson and Mark Marcel and Seth Breedlove and all these people all around you. Tim Halloran, I'm gonna miss some people, but it was one of those fun conversations that is hard to ever have again.
True. Gotcha.
Let's say a person comes up to you and is like,
yes,
Johnny, if I want to go out and I want to try to have an interaction with a Bigfoot in this area, how do you recommend that I do it? What's the stuff that I need to try probably?
I would say do your Bigfoot 101 first and kind of either go up on YouTube and just familiarize yourself with what a tree knock sounds like, the difference between a tree knock and a woodpecker, and up this area, gunshots, just know the difference. Not everything's a Bigfoot out there. Do your research on what animals are actually in the area, just to have a basic knowledge. And I would say just basically you just go out with, just like I do, just an open mind and a level head. And don't be aggressive. I mean, just go out by yourself, nice and quiet, and just to see what happens. Just to have good intentions. I would recommend.
I think that's extremely important. You brought that up. I'm glad you did. There's a few people that might hear that and be like, "Oh, I think that's crazy," and I have to say that it's not. And I'm on board with you, Johnny. That a lot of it has to do with how your intentions are. You have the things happen in the woods. You're going out to them. Do things ever follow you back to your home after you're done with these expeditions?
I've heard. Now, I live kind of like in the city limits, so if anything follows me back here, I mean, good luck, man. I'd give them props on that. But I've heard one night back, there's a good section of woods that unfortunately it's developed now, but back, I think it was just like a couple of years ago, I've heard like a really strange long howl back there, which could be suspicious or not. But that would be the only time, if you want to categorize that, if something follows me back home, I think that would probably be the only time that possible.
Gotcha. Last question for you. What kind of things do you bring with you when you go out to these areas to make sure that you are in a good place and not going to get messed up out there?
Personal protection, I usually carry a pistol with me everywhere I go. Equipment-wise, thermal equipment, thermal scopes, you can use that daytime or nighttime. That's basically your eyes out there. Other equipment I use, audio recorders. We carry police-issued body cams. These things are great. I mean, you can clip it right up on your chest rig. Internal battery, internal memory on a full charge. It probably record for about 14 hours. It's got IR. It's got audio. So that's, if anything happens and you're in try to pull out your cell phone or try to get things going, you just leave it running and boom, you got it.
Where do you pick up something like that?
So go right up on Amazon. Yeah, Amazon. I believe the ones that I use is a Patrol Master body cam. I got a few of them, and you know what they're good for too. I mean, it fits right in the palm of your hand. They're small, so if you think that you got some activity in the daytime, especially in the daytime, because night, it has two noticeable IR lights that come out. And it's probably only going to show maybe like about 25 feet. So, but in the daytime, if you think you got some activity, stick it up in a tree. It's really, really stealth, really discreet, wide angle lens. And you can really monitor a good area if you think that something's like coming through, stepping in the creek or anything like that.
It picks up pretty good audio.
Yes. Yeah. Real good audio.
Oh, I'm going to have to check that out. That's an interesting idea. I hadn't thought about that, but it makes total sense. It's kind of like, I guess, having a GoPro on you, but maybe a little less intrusive. So I'm going to check that out.
Less intrusive, and battery life is phenomenal on these things.
Okay. Well, yeah, thanks for the recommendation. Definitely check that out. Johnny, it's been just a real fun chat with you today, and you taught me a lot, and we played some fun audio, heard some good accounts. I just want to say thank you for coming on the show, man.
Appreciate you having me on. If you got a few more minutes, I can tell you about the one that I seen back a couple years ago.
Yeah. Totally. Let's do it, man.
So yeah, April 14th of 2023, up to that point, out there finding footprints, finding tree breaks, getting all this stuff on audio recorder, and everything is kind of pointing in the direction that it's a Bigfoot. It's a family of Bigfoot that are out there. And I was 2:30 in the afternoon. It was cloudy. It was a 2-lane country road, traveled it 100 times. To one side, to the left-hand side, it's a short step up and goes into the woods. On the other side of the road, the woods are back probably about 20 feet. I was headed down the straight part of the road doing 50 miles an hour, and I was going to come up on a slight incline. And there was a truck and a trailer that was coming down the hill. So I was headed toward the hill. The truck and trailer was coming down the hill. And it was like one of those fifth wheel hookups, probably one of those empty, up around here, they call them big techs. That's the brand name. And looked on the right-hand side, and there's something standing there. It's between the road and the tree line. And the most important part of the story is that the creature, I'm looking at its left-hand side, so I'm watching its left profile the whole time. Its left arm and its head was much, much darker than the color of the hair in its body. It was either a dark brown or it was a black. The color of the hair in its body was like a light tan. It was like lighter than a deer. So I was hit the straight part. I looked up and seen the truck and the trailer coming down. This thing was standing right-hand side. It was, when I first seen it, it was between the truck and the trailer. So right at that fifth wheel hitch, the truck had passed its location. And what this thing did was it swayed back and it started walking up and on the road, across the road. And the first thing that stood out was this thing was tall. I mean, ever though like the truck and the trailer was on its downslope, it was a lot taller than the trailer. And got into the first lane, and right in the middle of the first lane, I can start making out the side of its head, the shape of its head. By the time it got into where the lines go down the road and into the left-hand lane, I pretty much had like a full unobstructed view of this thing, just looking right up at it. And I can describe it as we kind of did like a measurement out there a few days later. It was between 7.5 and 8 foot tall. Like I said, I was looking at its left profile the whole time. Super long arms. The arms actually looked like it went down to where its knee should be. Wide arms. I mean, at the distance where I first seen it, the arms looked about as wide as a telephone pole. It didn't sway its arms at all when it was walking across the road. It had its arm down to its side the whole time. Its back was like perfectly straight. The head on this thing was huge. I'd kind of like described it as like a shape of a football. It was peaked on top and was peaked down at the bottom. It was not sitting on its shoulders like a person would have it. It was kind of it was front and down a little bit, almost like if you see these big bodybuilders in the World Man competition. And they had these really developed traps and neck muscles. That's what kind of it appeared to be there. That possibly could be it. But its head was slanted a little bit. It looked like the bottom of where its chin was. It was actually like resting up on its upper chest. And the closer I got, it's hard to describe. It's if you're picturing like a football, the outer part of the football, the head was a darker color, but right up in the center. On the outside was a lighter color, so that might have been where the face was. But this thing walked across the road. It did not make any bobbing motions. It went across as smooth as silk. I've never seen anything like that before. And it had did a little step up on the other side of the road. It's probably about like a 3-foot, 2-foot step up. It turned just slightly away from me, and I could see where its right shoulder blade was, and could see the color, the hair color on its back, and it went up into the woods. But yeah, that was April 14th of 2023, and yeah, these things exist. I went from a believer to a knower in 7 seconds.
Yeah, I mean that would be. I mean that's it from here on out. I mean, there is no absolute question. My goodness, wow. Do you feel like what you saw that day was something that was more ape-like or human-like, or just something completely different?
You know, looking at its side, it other than, you know, having arms and a chest and legs and all that, it kind of looked, let's see, almost like the stature of a gorilla. A gorilla has a really elongated head and just like a strong build. But if you watch a gorilla, like if they kind of like wobble a little bit, this thing walked across like no motion at all, just across. So it was kind of like a stature, kind of like a strong stature of like a gorilla would have, but it was different though. And like I said, we went back and measured it. It had to been between 7.5 and 8 foot tall. And I went back and I don't know if it came out of the woods. This is the strange part. I don't know if it came out of the woods or if it was squatting down when the guy with the truck and the trailer was coming down, and it just had stood up just before I seen it. But I went back in the woods where if it came out of, and there was a bunch of pine trees. They were kind of like stacked in kind of like a weird kind of configuration. There was also a tree break back there. And I also put an audio recorder up in the area where it went into and left it there for a couple of days. And it got a couple good tree knocks back there. I think the loudest one was probably about 2 o'clock in the morning, maybe 10 o'clock at night. But it was not what I had expected to see, because you kind of mentally prepare just in case you run into something. You don't want to be like a total shock to your system. So you mentally prepare like every time you go out there. And I had thought maybe it was going to be looking more like the Patty film, or maybe even like a Neanderthal. And it definitely did not look human. It just looked more like a monster. That's the only term I can use. It looks very creature-ish.
Is there a certain thing about it that made you think that you were looking at something that was like a monster?
I was zeroed in on its arm and its head the whole time. From the time it walked across for sure, because if it would have ran across the road, it probably would have cleared it in just a couple seconds. But it appeared to have taken its time, and I think the whole time that it took, it may have been about 7 seconds or so. But yeah, I was zeroed in on the upper body of it. Its head. I mean, just the shape of its head and how it was positioned on its body was very monsterish. I mean, I never seen anything like that before.
What you saw that day, is it something like it's a really interesting question. What you experienced, what you saw, did it feel like it was something that could be worked with, or if there were a lot of them, we would perhaps be in trouble?
Well, from my experiences out there, other than that grunt and that growl that one day, and I mean the yell and hitting the trees, and I've been out there a lot. And when I go out there, I'm usually out there 90% of the times by myself, out in the woods, out in the creek beds, different times of the year, different times of the day. Never had anything aggressively come at me. And from other stories I've heard with campers that camp there, and they believe that they've had something come in their camp or run through their camp. It's more, in this area here, it's more curious. I think that if you encounter this thing and it had a bad day, or if you got close enough to it that it got pissed off, it'd probably tear you apart. But I think, just my personal opinion, the clan or the group up there are more curious. And plus you also got to think too. I mean, the people that go to a state park, they're pretty predictable. I mean, no one's going in there hunting. No one's going there with vicious intent. They're pretty much keeping to the trails. They're in at a certain time. They're out at a certain time. They're pretty, I would think they're pretty much a mellow group. And if anybody's there overnight, they're pretty much contained to the campground area. So I'm just assuming that maybe they're used to that mellowness of the people that go there. But a wild animal too. I mean, it could be just a wild animal mentality. If you get close enough to it, it might turn on you.
Extremely interesting to think about. Were there any other things that you wanted to make sure that you shared before the end of our time today?
No, I'm really appreciated that you invited me on the show. I had a great time, and just keep a level head and an open mind when you're out there, and maybe you'll run into one.
Johnny, is there a way people can reach out to you? Or are you a researcher that kind of stays undercover in a way?
I used to. I'm up on Facebook. You can find me up on Facebook, Johnny Tucker on Facebook. And if anybody would like to message me in private, you can do it there. Medoc Bigfoot at Gmail if you want to send me a private email. And my website is medocbigfoot.com if you'd like to pop in every now and again and see what kind of interesting things I find. But yeah, I'm up on Facebook. I'm out in the woods and investigating and trying to find stuff as much as I could. It's kind of like a passion for me.
That's great. And I would, recommend if people know things about the area that he's been talking about, feel free to reach out to Johnny. You can always reach out to me as well, but definitely reach out to the people that are in that area that can make good use of that information. But Johnny, thanks so much for coming on the show today.
Jeremiah, it's been a pleasure. Thank you so much. And I will keep in touch.
Just want to take a few minutes to say thank you to you, all my listeners, for listening to the podcast. Please take a minute to help out the show by subscribing on YouTube, making sure you hit the bell so you don't miss any notifications, and share the episode on YouTube with a friend. Also, if you're listening to us on a podcast, thank you so much. Make sure that you're subscribed, share the show with a friend. Really, it's all about sharing the show wherever you can. If you've had a Bigfoot encounter related to the following or know someone who has, please reach out to me at bigfootsociety@gmail.com or pass on my email. Here's a list: the Subtle Lake area of Oregon, Rainbow, Oregon, McKinsey Bridge area, Sweet Home, pretty much that entire area, the north part, if you get what I mean. I'll see you back next time, listeners. Sasquatch Summerfest this year, July 11th through the 12th. It's going to be fantastic. July 11th through 12th in Green Waters Park in Oak Ridge, Oregon. And listeners, if you're going to go, you can get a 2-day ticket for the cost of one if you use the code BFS, like Bigfoot Society, but BFS, and it'll get you some off your cost. Priscilla was nice enough to provide that for my listeners. So there you go. I look forward to seeing you there. So make sure you head over to www.sasquatchsummerfest.com and pick up your tickets today.